This is Edge Perspectives, a weekly conversation about the biggest insights that span healthcare market intelligence, quality, and operations with the Vizient Strategy Intelligence team and other experts.
What is your why? Ultimately, we're still back to that. If you can rally people around the why for the organization or the initiative, you can rally. Even in these very challenging times, you can get it done. There's a real positive spirit about that.
Hello, this is Edge Perspectives, and I'm your host, Tori Richie. Today, we are going to be debriefing on the Vizient Executive Strategy Summit. I am joined by my two leaders, Brianna Motley and Bill Woodson. Brianna, Bill, thank you so much for joining.
Great to be here right after the conference.
So we're going to kick things off while things are still fresh. I'm curious, what were some of the emerging themes you heard during this year's summit?
We felt a sense of uncertainty in the room. That seems present at every conference you go to. It felt different this year, with some people expressing the sense that this is something in between urgency and panic. I had another health system leader say, we believe there's an existential threat. And even the more calm CFO said, this feels a little different. We have a bias towards action and a path forward, but this looks extremely challenging.
People are ready to act, they're ready to move. And while there was uncertainty and a little bit of maybe trepidation, I still felt some energy. The attendees that we had in the room were still excited to be here. They were excited to meet with each other, networking, coming together and solving some of the big challenges within healthcare.
Bill, I'm thinking back to the main stage talk that you gave with Lisa Goldstein on day one. Lisa set the current environment up for us so nicely. She said the next 2 years are going to determine the next decade for health systems. That point of uncertainty, there are a lot of headwinds that we are facing. There's so much that's outside of the immediate control of health systems in many ways. But I do get the sense that organizations are psychologically ready for it. They recognize the environment that they're navigating. What are some of those markers of success? What are some best practices that organizations should be implementing to ensure that they set themselves up for success in the next 2 years to dictate that next decade?
On the financial foundation front, the basics still matter. Lisa highlighted the importance of capital capacity. Do you have the capital, but how you're deploying it? Inpatient in some cases, but your ambulatory portfolio, and noting in particular that your technology investments and things like AI are operational expenses, but still are examined for what return they might make. The other successes, key factors lean into your approach to ambulatory services moving forward. Great quote. Remember, ambulatory strategy is not a real estate play. We get much more into the nuances, the operational aspects of delivering that care in a different portfolio. The growing complexity of the ambulatory portfolio and the types of services that are delivered in different locations and in different care pathways. And then the intersection of service line strategy with enterprise strategy as it relates to ambulatory. So that's financial aspect, then ambulatory, and any number of talks about access, the role of the consumer, and orchestrating the journey.
Those were key topics over the 3 days, Bill. There was so much conversation about access. How do you redefine it? We were fortunate enough to have some of our consumer strategy experts. There were a lot more patient experience and chief marketing officers in the room. A lot of conversation about intersection. How do you bring together claims data to better understand what that patient experience looks like? What are the referral patterns that you can't plan for ambulatory without knowing what's going on in the ambulatory space? It was great that we were able to dive several layers deep within that ambulatory space. How do you measure it? What are the metrics of success? And what do we need to shoot for moving forward?
Tori, another topic that came up, success pathways, is around partnerships, and in lots of different senses. Those are community partnerships. Those are traditional joint ventures. It's working with other hospitals and parts of the care continuum. Those are clinical enterprise partnerships with data companies as you stand up your AI capabilities, non-healthcare aspects of partnerships, which are newer to the conversation moving forward, and lots of internal partnerships in ways we have not talked about before. How are the chief strategy officers going to have to partner differently in the future with the chief technology officer, the chief operations officer, and probably the chief people officer as well?
What I found to be really interesting is the mindset has begun to shift within organizations that we are finally challenging some of the orthodoxies of the healthcare business and some of those systems that have been long-standing and have maybe served us really well in the past, but just aren't viable moving forward. Brianna, when it comes to achieving growth for a system, what were some of the key themes that you heard emerging as far as what systems are testing out, what some of the barriers to success are that they're experiencing?
So much conversation about growth over the 3 days. A couple of things that I would certainly point out. Number one, you can't grow if you don't have space. So capacity was an underlying theme here. What are systems doing to manage, for example, the expanding TAVR regulations and the growth and the demand that's going to come with that? I also heard one service line where we know there is more growth than there ever will be capacity for, which is behavioral health. We were fortunate enough to have Children's Nebraska talk to us about how they're managing growth within the pediatric behavioral health population. From a community standpoint, that is something that you can't do on their own. Also, in order to accommodate that growth, they're redesigning and transforming the traditional system of care. Those patients have no wrong door. That's a member example. The other consideration about growth is we talked a lot about the importance of putting growth within context of other operational metrics. There was a slide on our main stage that said the cheapest bed is the one you never have to build. One of the underlying themes this year was you have to look at all sides of the problem, all sides of the angle, and understand where do you have opportunity to reduce length of stay, to improve readmissions, to smooth out post-acute transitions in order to be able to have the appropriate capacity to accommodate the growth and demand that we know is going to come.
In terms of the growth engine, many service lines now are really emphasizing the virtual front door to have outreach programs that can help manage patient care or even deliver patient care in the cases of behavioral health before they get into the true system of care for active treatment. But that applies to other service lines as well. Expands you geographically, extends the reach of your physicians, scales your workforce. Those are compelling stories. And then in my talk, we emphasized building the ambulatory funnel. What that means is having a scientific, data-driven approach to understanding how many patients come in the front end of a care pathway, let's say for osteoarthritis, and how many come out on the other side, hopefully for a joint replacement, hip or knee, with lots of ambulatory services delivered in the middle. Your understanding of those ambulatory pathways is essential to the growth funnel, your growth success, and how you hit your market share targets.
Ambulatory was a very implicit theme that we had for the summit this year, intentionally and in some ways not intentionally. Ambulatory strategy is something that we've been talking about for so long. I'm starting to get the sense that health systems are ready to invest in their ambulatory network to expand and try new care models to open up access in that way.
Brianna mentioned the construction. I was asking around because there are facilities being built, right? There's still a lot of new capacity coming online for a whole bunch of good reasons. But the cost of steel is such that I asked one system, you're adding 100 beds on a specific campus. That's $400 million. Another hospital we talked to, they're scoping out a brand new facility, $1.6 billion. These are numbers we've never heard before in American healthcare. It leads to different discussions about how you think about the business moving forward. In a slightly different twist, we asked the chief strategy officers, who's going to be the most important executive that you interact with in the future? In some cases, it may be the chief technology officer, but several of them said, we don't have one yet, but it's the chief ambulatory officer. What that role is it more operational, more strategic, yet to be determined? That's a future state that we're just beginning to embrace.
There was also a lot of conversation about what's happening outside the funnel. Where is that leakage going? What is the latest on disruptors? Where are they accelerating in specific states? And how do you recapture what our primary care experts refer to as that invisible market? Now that ambulatory competition isn't just claims-based, it's people willing to pay out of pocket for services because that's how they want to redefine access for them.
Your most important ambulatory service came up in several sessions, and that's pharmacy, specialty pharmacy, cellular genetic therapy, infusion services, very important to the academic health systems and the pediatric health systems. A real emphasis on that throughout the conference and a recognition of its importance in your revenue and profitability growth. It's what sustains most health systems right now, particularly if we include 340B drug pricing in there.
I want to come back to this intersection that we're seeing between strategy and ClinOps strategy and finance. Could you all speak to how do we see the role of the strategy office evolving, and what are some of the structures that we need to put in place to help facilitate that alignment and that integration of strategy across these other business units?
We held a great session with a group of chief strategy officers and asked them that direct question. What is your role? What is it going to be? And we got a variety of different answers. Some of them focused on the data aspects and what capabilities are coming online because of AI, such that the traditional functions that they do, or the traditional approaches to planning, are automated with market analysis, which frees them up to do things like new business development or plan execution in ways that they've never done before, not just doing the partnership, but executing its operational approach or monitoring its performance. Precision strategy is a term we heard more and more. We heard one CSO say, my future job is as a well-informed portfolio manager. Portfolio management is a good approach to looking at the span of what the business is going to be. We talked about how is your time being spent versus where the revenue is coming from. So the encounter versus revenue dynamic comes to play. Someone else said, my job is to be a prioritization catalyst in the organization more than I've ever been before. And I'm going to be much more engaged with workforce as a strategy than I have historically, because that's what's going to make it successful or not.
As you went through all of those different topics, it ties back to the conversation that you had with Dr. Ken Holman from Center Care about leadership and the importance of leaders being positioned to effectively take action.
Ken said a few things. He said, what is your why? Ultimately, we're still back to that. If you can rally people around the why for the organization or the initiative, and he brought this up in the context of starting a new medical school in rural Minnesota, you can rally. Even in these very challenging times, you can get it done. There's a real positive spirit about that. So he said the role of leadership continues to be to provide oxygen to hope, which gets to the inspiration that we still need in what's going on in healthcare today. We have to eliminate our opt-out culture, which every health system have. You can opt out of things that are going on, and physicians are kind of notorious for this in health systems right now. The leaders have to prevent that as much as possible. And then challenged us and challenged the industry and said, we need to avoid the relentless pursuit of mediocrity, which is what we've gotten away with for the past couple of decades. He threw down the gauntlet, though, in a very uplifting way.
And he also said that the young ones in the room were the future.
And when he said that, he looked at me, meaning I am not in that category.
I think he called you out specifically.
Ken was fantastic. It does speak to this culture within leadership of being willing to push the boundaries, being willing to delegate and pull some of the fresh perspective in to begin to evolve and change the way that it is that we're creating systems for providing and delivering care to folks.
There are a few stories that caught my attention as I went through, and they're about what's rippling through beneath the surface. The most compelling talk I went to was about artificial intelligence. We had the chief digital officer from MUSC, South Carolina. We had the chief medical officer from Duke. They talked about the different aspects of AI. The chief digital officer embracing it as a way to accelerate care and access speed processes in the system, and the chief quality officer from Duke being somewhat of a contrarian and being very hesitant because of its potential impacts on patient safety. And he gave specific reasons why. Still enthusiastic, but with a cautious optimism. And the chief digital officer at MUSC also told an incredible story about be careful about what you wish for. So they had this great AI tool that could automatically create or assign patients to appointments for mammograms. The AI tool found 150 appointments, got patients signed up automatically. And then she got a call from the person who was leading the mammography program and said, what have you done? And there was like, well, there were 150 spots and we filled them. And the chief of the mammography service said, that's true, but we have a guarantee that we will follow up in 24 hours if we see something that the patient needs to know about. So it's great that we filled the spots. We don't have the people to do the follow-up in care. There are all these other aspects to patient care processes that we're just starting to learn about as we deploy these powerful AI tools. On the Duke side, it was these incredible care decompensation models for sepsis, for respiratory care, for congestive heart failure, all sorts of data AI capabilities, but they're too sensitive. The medical staff has to learn to trust them, when to intervene, when not to intervene, when the signal goes off, and they're still learning 4 years in and just beginning to trust them.
It's beginning to build a relationship, but not a reliance on AI in many ways. How is it a tool in your toolkit to help facilitate execution and help improve operations? But still some stopgaps needed, perhaps.
Tori, the AMC sessions were thorough and deep, but more broadly, they dug into topics that are well known to that group: scale, systemness, and the growing importance of pharmacy and their role in a complex delivery system. On the PED side, the first session was a panel, and on the panel was the head of the American Academy of Pediatrics, the CEO of the Children's Hospital Association, and a couple of health system CEOs. This is a tough time for children's hospitals because of all sorts of reasons, and that's policy reasons, which they were very direct about, things going on with vaccinations, Medicaid, and also the birth rate, just the realities of demographics in the country right now. They were a serious and always an incredibly uplifting audience, but it's a very existential time for the PEDS hospitals. And yet we heard an incredibly compelling case story about Children's Nebraska opening a new behavioral health campus, how they did it, and its amazing success.
And the thought that they put into that environment, their willingness to truly transform care for those kids and go with trauma-informed care with a nature and art-inspired facility, even down to the chairs. The presenters there were telling stories about how they had the kids test out the chairs, and they ended up tossing all of the chairs they bought because they weren't comfortable for kids. Just an incredible amount of precision planning, which is a key word, going into how they thought about everything from that facility.
And also patient-centric planning, thinking about the end user, which is the individual who's receiving care. Bill, we're another year in, the term systemness. What is your relationship with the word these days?
We coexist.
You coexist. Okay.
Peacefully coexist. No, maybe not always peacefully. We didn't hear the term as much. It's been internalized to the point where it's got something tangible around it now for what people are working on.
You mentioned we dove deep in the AMC session, and we did have some really interesting analysis around systemness. thinking about moving toward academic health systems and the implications that that has for those systems who are getting bigger from a payer standpoint, from a composition of your health system standpoint, and how that truly influences the type of care, the acuity of care that you're providing within each of those facilities. Our team, Mike and Justin, were able to do some really neat things with a collection of Vizient data to show the bigger you get, the harder it is to maintain that TQ balance.
Justin loves challenging the AMC audience about the invisible healthcare economy. It's a rate of growth. We're talking tens and billions of dollars of growth each year, direct to consumer in ways that obviously we don't see. And what's important about the platforms that they're building is that they're about health and not healthcare. And we have to keep that in the conversation of our future planning capabilities, expertise moving forward.
We've covered a lot of ground in the last 3 days, and there have been such incredible discussions that we've had with a number of systems. I'm curious, what is one thing that you are walking away from this year's summit that you're going to carry forward as we think about planning for the next year?
This year in our summit structure agenda design, one of the things we thought was really important to do was move the audience past talking conceptually and highlighting strategies, bridging toward action. The role of strategy is evolving to get more involved with execution. That's something that we recognize. And I saw it play out this year in an incredible way. The level of detail that we were able to get to with our panelists and our breakout sessions on day 2 gave the audience some tangible takeaways to take home and move on day 1. As we think about what we can continue to do, how we can continue to improve in the content that we're developing and what we're setting up for members, it is truly that strategists have to bridge from impact to action, and we need to support our member base as well.
I heard something at the end of the day that felt right. The chief strategy officer saying, as my role changes, I need to remember that everyone else's role is changing at the same time. And that has us collectively thinking less about turf and more about the future capabilities of a role moving forward and the competencies that are going to be needed to take those on. And we've not done that work yet, but there's an openness to doing it in ways that we've never done before.
Brianna, Bill, thank you so much for planning and executing such a successful summit, but also staying after to debrief with me. Thanks for listening to this episode of Edge Perspectives, a podcast from Vizient. If you have questions or ideas for future episodes, please reach out to us using the email address in the show notes.